Best-selling author and American psychologist Mary Pfeiffer said this: "We live in a world filled with language. Language imparts identity, meaning, and perspective to our human community. Writers are either polluters or part of the cleanup team. Just as the language of power and greed has the potential to destroy us, the language of reason and empathy has the power to save us. Writers can inspire a kinder, fairer, more beautiful world, or invite selfishness, stereotyping, and violence. Writers can unite people or divide them." In this book show podcast, host, confidence coach Susan Axelrod asks women authors a simple question: which kind of writer are you? She invites each guest to step into the confidence zone to proclaim how her book can inspire. If you are seeking inspiration to create your legacy, take out your pen and pad. Your book, My Time, starts now. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of this wonderful podcast, Your Book, My Time. I'm Susan Axelrod, the confidence coach, your host in this podcast. I want to tell you, I love my podcast. I honestly, truly do. I love the opportunity that I have given myself in my business to research, connect with, and get to know inspiring women authors. Today is no exception. I am delighted to bring you Amy Conway-Hatcher, who is the author of the brand new book just out, Infinitely More: Choosing Freedom, a Career Mom's Turning Point. This book resonated so deeply with me because there was a time in my life that I did choose freedom, going from full-time working mom, type A personality, through an emotional breakdown, to part-time work through consulting, full-time mom, and a happier way of life. So I am delighted to say hello and welcome you, Amy. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Susan, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm not the only one with whom this book is going to resonate. Before we start our conversation, would you like to hold up what you got in the mail?
Last night, it is on Amazon now. On paperback, and I'm really excited, as I told you as well, a little bit scared, but it's out there.
Honestly, in my world, scary is beautiful. The fact that this book came up out of you, and we're going to talk about that, really shows your willingness to be the voice of our time on this topic. So I have a saying: it may have all been said before, but it hasn't all been heard. And Amy, this is relevant because of those old books that you likely have read as well, that were written, could have been written 100 years ago, 20 years ago, that are still in circulation, still being discussed, and the message transcends time. But every now and then we have new voices sharing this message. You know what I mean?
I do. I think there's so many books out there that tell you to really look at who you are and what you believe in and the values that you hold, and ask you to ask yourself, are you living them? And I think often we're not. Even the best of us, even those of us who believe that that the world has great potential to be good, often are not living exactly in the way that we hoped, we would be if we looked in the mirror.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I call authenticity. I teach the intuitive business system. I am in what I call intuitive business. And in intuitive business, where you invoke your woman's intuition, you're allowed to actually live the values that you feel. And whereas in an older paradigm, often you're not really allowed to live those values. So I want to ask you the question: what is the story behind the story of this book?
So the question of why I wrote the book, the story behind that, I still find myself asking myself that question every morning when I wake up and I'm breathing out of my paper bag, asking, why the heck did I do this? I think looking back at the time, it's really part of a journey that I would say that I'm still on. I came into writing a book thinking that I would write a book about leadership. I've studied leadership for years, and I've been involved in cleaning up messes that leaders made or inherited from others in my corporate investigations and crisis management work. And I saw a lot of contradictions there. I also saw a lot of contradictions within my own world of big law. And I was frustrated. So I started to write this leadership book. I interviewed some incredible people who are very well known. And at each turn, I kept getting these questions of, well, what are you doing? Well, what is it that you're doing to live the values that you are writing about, that you believe in? And how does that work in your life? And it was very hard to write about that. When I left Big Law back in March of last year, I wasn't ready to talk about it at that point. And I was still writing my leadership book that didn't get great feedback from the editors, in part because it didn't delve into personal stories about how I was living what I believed people need to do in order to be good leaders and to develop positive cultures in organizations and in institutions. And so I sat with it for a while. And then I saw an article online that was written by a woman in the ABA Journal. And she basically was talking about how women have to work harder in order to get ahead. And the problem with why working moms weren't getting ahead was because when women had babies, they sort of lose focus and they weren't working hard enough. And I thought, good Lord, that is awful advice. It's the advice I received. It happened to be true. But why are we telling people that? And why are we allowing the system to put us in a position of being super uber overachievers as the norm, as opposed to changing the system that really needs to change and equalizing playing fields that frankly aren't even close to being equal? And so I was mad about it. And I wrote an article and I put it out on social media, and I heard from a ton of women about how I feel the same way. But I can't say it. I can't speak out about the inequities in my system. But I'm living the same life and I experience the same things that you did. And I thought to myself, especially within the legal field, that is so awful, because here we are fighting for truth and justice and fairness for our clients, yet we can't speak out on behalf of ourselves. In fact, we have to remain mute. And that's where I really had to dig in and think about, was I really interested or capable or willing to write the book that everybody had been whispering to me for over a year that I should write? And the question sort of came back, if not you, then who, right? You're fresh out of the system. You have something to say. You were successful, and yet you got your butt kicked. Why don't you write about that? And so that's where the book came from. And I would say I'm still on the journey, because I'm still learning how to talk about an experience that I had so many layers of protection to keep myself safe over the years. And I'm not talking about anything, anything earth-shattering like some women have to tell.
Personal safety, emotional safety.
And the day-to-day stuff, the emotional stuff that you feel when you're walking into a room and people say stupid stuff. Right. I think I'm still learning about it. So it's very much a part of a journey. So why the book? I wanted women to know, who are like me, and there are many of them, that they're not alone and that it's okay to talk about it. And two, I wanted leaders to get off their butts and do something about it. I wanted them to actually acknowledge that these inequities still exist and do more to fix it. Not the easy stuff, do the hard stuff, because we've done the easy stuff. That's not too hard, but we're having the same conversations we've been having for 20, 30 years. Why is that?
I know. It's hard for me to keep quiet. So 20, 30 years.
Sorry, a little long-winded and passionate.
No. It's just this is the conversation to have. It's not just 20, 30 years. It's millennia, really. And why is the conversation the same? But the most important thing here was when you started writing that leadership book, and then somehow you asked yourself, am I living the values, or am I in the values of what it is that I'm, kind of seeking? Now we bring it in. And to me, in the intuitive business and the way that I'm in business and that I run my business and the people I work with, this is what I call authenticity. This is where there's no imposter syndrome or personal fraud, right? This is where, I call this being soul connected, even in business, where you are as you want to be, as your soul wants to be.
So I love the words soul connected. I'm not as much a fan of authenticity, although I know what it means and I believe in it. But I think people throw it out there and it's almost like it's almost become cliche because everybody talks about it, but you look at the people who are uttering it and you're like, really? Do you really believe in that? Do you even know what it means? And are you living it yourself? Because I would venture to guess many people who talk about it have no idea what they're talking about. Some people do, obviously. But
well, this is your, I call it POV, point of view, the lens through which you see in that world that you were in.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy and excited to tell you now that you chose freedom per the title of your book, that you are going to really meet many, many people who do walk that talk. But as I'm saying, the message with your voice at this time, where you do have credibility in the world of big law, as you said, that was your world that you came out of, or big business, if you want to extrapolate further. This is so hugely important. I love, love, love times a million the message to women: you are not alone. As a coach for women in the second half of life, as a confidence coach, one of the ways we feel the least confident is when we feel so alone. And you're really fighting a system. But first, you're in that soul disconnected place. And that's why I really invoke that. I love the message to other women: you are not alone. And since you did break through and I know what it takes to write a book. I have 3 books myself. I work with women who write books. I know what it takes through. Since you did break through it yourself, you have this to truly offer them on a silver plate.
I think that's right. I think what I wanted some people to understand is that there were moments, right, where there are many times where I felt like I was walking into the world alone, and I had on my protective gear, my suit. I call it my warrior suit in the book. And there were many layers to it. And it was whether I was walking into a school event where I was going to deal with the mom competition, or whether I was walking into a boardroom to advise a CEO and the board of directors about a problem that they had, or I was walking into a lunch with my law firm partners. I had protective layers on at every single stage, and it was exhausting. It was completely exhausting. And there were times where I would say I felt truly empowered because I was doing some really badass thing that was helping other people, and it worked. And then there were other times where I felt like I just wanted to go into a corner and hold my girlfriend's friend and tell her about what a shitty meeting this was, because, people were not behaving in a way that was truly respectful towards women. And I don't mean that in the sense of dirty jokes or anything like that. I mean it in the sense of that subtle bias, microaggression, undercutting women in the workplace that we have to deal with every day, that is very, very hard to overcome. And the fascinating thing to me is that nobody speaks up about it. Nobody will, rally to the cause in a very short way and cut it off. And so there are these paper cuts that you get day in and day out. And that's on top of it being hard because, as you know, being a working mom, there are a lot of things that default to the mom.
Of course.
And so you have these visible and invisible burdens that nobody can count, that nobody can appreciate, except for other moms and other people like you. But then we don't take the time to sort of talk about the days that are really, really hard, legitimately hard, that sort of take your breath away.
Yeah, a few things are coming up for me. Number one, ask any working dad what the jockstrap size is of his son, or the Mary Jane, the size of the new tap shoes for their daughter, the next size, needed. And 80% of them are not going to know the answer to that question. even the one about the sun. And number two, another thing that's coming up is this messaging about being working moms. We have that in common, is exactly the same for any minority group, outside a majority that I hear and I speak about with people, and I listen and I see and I observe when you say the 1,000 paper cuts along the way. This message has a big universality again at this exact moment in time. This is really coming up for me, Amy. And I, you see me looking off because I see energy finding me on this. I'm like, oh, damn, Amy, I don't know if you're ready for it, but it is a voice for our time, because you're talking to a large group of people, two groups, the women and the leaders. But even by extrapolation, you're talking to a much wider group of people as well. And so the second question, anybody who listens to my show knows the second question I always ask is, why is your book worth my time to read? And honestly, the answer is embedded so deeply there, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I think in part it's to know that you're not alone. I mean, I was a tough gal. I was a prosecutor for years. I prosecuted homicide cases and sex offense cases. I walked into those rooms being the only female in the room, and I was okay with that. I mean, I had fully intended to make my mark and to not just work for the big guys. I wanted to compete with them. And I did for many, many years. So I think that, making people feel not alone is that even the toughest of us, even the people who believe that they have it licked, and everybody who thinks, oh, she can handle herself, and it's really hard, and it's okay to admit that it's hard. I think the other thing is, my story again is my story. I don't think it's incredibly unique in the sense that I think many women do extraordinary things every day, and we've normalized them to ordinary, and then set the bar even higher, right? To not work 24/7, but to work 84/12, which doesn't exist. And right. I think we're the kind of, I think we've been sort of ingrained with, okay, well, I can meet that challenge. I can go to that next crazy level. Instead of saying, well, do we need to step back and rethink about how we're working and whether or not this system makes us work harder than we really need to achieve the very same objectives that others do. I think the other thing too, from a leader's perspective, is I hope that people take a step back after reading this book and saying, okay, what were my dreams when I walked into this profession? What did I want to achieve? And what are the days on which I felt like incredibly strong, like I had incredible success? And where are you with that? And then what are the days where you felt incredibly weak? And are you having more days where you feel weak? Or are you having more days where you feel strong and brave? And are you in a system that allows you to be your absolute best? And then from the leader's perspective, to start asking people around them what it takes for them not to just show up in the morning, but to actually perform at the level they're performing. What does it take for you to be here and give me the work product and the level of effort that I need in order to make this business successful? I think there's a lot to be learned by people talking to each other really honestly, and to learn what you can do to make the system better. And we're not going to be able to fix it unless we really take the time to hear people's stories. So my story is an invitation for you to tell yours. I've heard from so many women who are like, yeah, that's me. That happened to me. Like, I get it. And here's some more, and here's some other things that I experienced. I want people to be able to share that, because you really can't fix a problem unless you start to understand it.
I mean, again, it's coming up for me how by extrapolation, not even extrapolating, but direct hit on how many other groups are impacted the same way. But I want to say that women connect. In the feminine energy, we connect in nurturing ways and supportive ways and emotional ways. And in this, the world that you are in, that's not valued. I mean, it should be valued in my opinion, but it's not valued because outcome metrics, that's what's valued.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think one of the things that gets lost is women connecting in that way gets lost. I write about this in a chapter of the book where we get into this competition thing because that's what's valued. And so the behavior even among women in the workplace is not to talk about these experiences that we all have that make us vulnerable and human, but to compete with each other in a way that, I sort of jokingly say, we're sort of given this one chair that we could compete for because that's what the guys say we can have. And so we fight like cats and dogs over that one chair instead of saying, you know what, that guy's lazy and we're going to move him out because we're going to compete for that chair too. And then we'll take this, just sort of thinking strategically about how do we support each other. I found that there were so many areas where we were competitive and had sharp elbows instead of banding together and saying, how do we make this a better, more successful workplace because we can keep more of us in, right? We can retain more of us and make it a sustainable existence and get the very best thinking out of people. And at the end of the day, have a little bit of fun because life is short and we weren't having any fun.
I know. I was at my friend's daughter's rehearsal dinner, I think sometime last year. And I ended up talking to somebody I didn't know, a family member, a woman, a 40-year-old-ish woman, lawyer, who told me that she left kind of big law and was now, I don't know if she was a partner or whatever, principal in this small kind of niche law firm, working for a woman with two other women lawyers and women associates, whatever. They created the atmosphere, the culture that they wanted to create in the understanding of what you're talking about. So that especially during COVID and also separately, you got to go to a soccer game, we'll cover here, that the clients know who we are. They know what the culture is of our operation. And so you may hear me, I may be on conference in my car. And if that's not okay with you, then we're not the place for you. Really crafting, creating, grabbing, with intention, the ability to still produce what that lawyer would want to produce, no compromise on the production, the productivity, but where you have this, again, I'm going to use the word more authentic space of, again, this is where I invoke that soul connection, where the owner of this law firm, you say, was a woman who, in quotation marks, gets it. And
so I think the soul connection comment that so speaks to me because I have to say that I felt like I was in a world that was devoid of soul in a way. And even clients noticed it. So clients would say, and it wasn't just a specific firm. I've been in 3 firms. I've been in the industry for a long time. It was sort of this, I would say that there were instances where the industry sort of is devoid of this soul that connects people and keeps people, creates that special glue that make people want to stay in. It's almost an industry where everybody sort of wants to make as much money as they can and then flee, and hopefully they get out alive. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of really good things that happen there. And that soul piece was something that I wrote about to leadership where, I don't know if I used that word exactly, but it resonates so much with me because it makes people feel not just that they belong, but that they feel like they have something to contribute, like there's a mission that's bigger than themselves, that's important for them to be part of. I think in that environment, people are willing to work really, really hard and deliver really, really good stuff, right?
Well, don't we see that in a legal aid society?
Correct.
In a legal, yeah. And so I put my hand on my heart when you said that, because the truth is, when you're in your own soul connection, I work in infusing soul in business with unapologetically, unabashedly. When there's soul in business, you produce more. But, for the own personal soul connection, I think that you just really said it's when you're in that place that you're all in. You'll have the baby over here and you'll have the conference, over here, the baby in one arm and the conference phone in the other. You're all in, and you use the word when you feel. And that really, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say when you feel, because we don't allow ourselves to feel. I think there's you know, it's a broad pronouncement to make. And I don't want to say that there's nobody who's feeling in some of these workplaces where the culture is lackluster. But I do think that what leaders need to understand, and I think we in leadership, positions or in really any position in organization, if the organization doesn't have a soul and you don't have values, and everybody sort of says that they have these like core values, and some of it's true and some of it's total bullshit. But I think unless you have this connection, right, where people feel like they're part of something, and that means you have to communicate. That means that you have to show that you care about the people who work there, that they're not just a widget who is performing a service. And look, part of my mantra and sort of my message in the book is, if you are an organization who doesn't want to have the soul, have that kind of connection with people, have those values that really matter, that keep people interested and engaged and loyal, then you need to say it. You just need to say who you are. I'll say who I am, right, and what I want, and I have to own that. But then you have to say who you are. Don't bullshit people, because at the end of the day, they will see through that. And if they make a deal with you where you weren't honest, then they'll be mad, right? And they'll be, they not only won't be loyal, but they won't come back to you for other reasons. So even if, for example, like, let's just take Big Law, they go and work for some company and become a general counsel and become your client, they may not want to hire you because you didn't care about them when you worked there. So what makes you think that they're really going to have your back when you leave? Right. So I think that there's something about that connection and that human thing and making people feel, I don't know, brave and loyal and, by your side. It's intangible, but it's so critically important.
So important. We only have a few minutes, and I need to get to the thing. One of the things that resonated so deeply with me when I saw you and found you on social media, and that is that you've built philanthropy, love of humankind, into the model of the business of being an author. And so I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to let our listeners know that the proceeds from this book will be benefiting 4 organizations that support women and girls. One is Together Rising. The second is the UN Foundation's Girl Up. The third is Young Leaders World. And the fourth is the Women's Bar Association Foundation. Amy, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have you come back for a part 2 of this, because I really want to explore the why of this, the how of this, why these organizations, and the model of, this type of book. Will you come back for part 2?
Absolutely. Happy to.
Yay. I'm so excited. I don't know if you know, but I too, through my books, give a part of the proceeds to support women through my sponsoring of coaching, sponsoring them in my groups, out gifting, and all kinds of things. So we're totally in sync on that. So Amy, let me ask you, where can people find you to continue this conversation?
So people can find me I'm still building my website. That should be up in the next couple of weeks. But I'm often posting on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most often posting. And you can reach out to me. My connection information is there. I do some on Instagram and some on Facebook, but probably not as much as I should. So I'm sort of learning the game of how to get messages out. I'm very accessible. I'm very easy to find. And I welcome the opportunity to talk to people who are struggling with these issues. I'm not a professional coach, and I'm not, sort of engaged in that work right now, but I have committed myself to try to help others figure out if they're in a space that they want to be in, and if not, how to get out of that space and make connections. And I'm also committed to organizations that want to do a little bit better and say, hey, we don't really understand where we've gone wrong, but we really do want to try and figure it out and work with people who have left to understand better why women leave, so that we can keep more of the talent that we have. Because I think it's critically important that we keep women in the game for as long as we can without killing them.
Oh my gosh, I think I'm going to have to leave it on that note. That's where we're going to get started in our next conversation. Amy, I'm loving this. I want to let you know I am actually an expert on how to get that message out. So you should know that I'm available to you to do that, and to everyone else.
You're a rock star with what you do.
Oh, thank
Total
you.
rock
Thank
star.
you. Oh, thank you so much. And as a testament to how approachable Amy is, I just reached out to her on LinkedIn, and that's how we ended up here. So, Amy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for breaking through all the blocks, barriers, and resistance that you needed to break through to be a voice of our time. I will be talking to you about scheduling part 2, and I'll be looking forward to it. Take good care.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.